Today's meeting, we're very pleased to welcome Bruno Seraphin, Jessica Conrad, and Chook-Chook Hillman, who will share their work on Indigenous fire, stewardship, sovereignty, and crisis response in Karuk country. Bruno Seraphin is an assistant professor of anthropology and social and critical inquiry at the University of Connecticut. He's a settler from Nipmuc territory. He holds a PhD in anthropology from Cornell University and a BFA in film and television from NYU. Since 2018, he's partnered with the Karuk Tribe on multimedia community collaborative environmental justice research, examining the politics of wildlife crisis and Indigenous fire management in Northern California. He is the 2025-2026 Mellon Native American Scholars Initiative Postdoctoral Fellow here at the APS. Chook-Chook Hillman is Karuk and has spent his life immersed in Karuk tribal culture and traditions. He was born and raised near his great-grandmother's village near Somes Bar, California. Chook-Chook is a community organizer, cultural practitioner, and expert on Karuk ecological knowledge. Finally, Jessica Conrad is a Karuk person who was raised and is currently living in Karuk ancestral lands in Northern California. Jessica has nearly 15 years of experience in natural resource management and fieldwork, starting her career out as a youth worker for the Karuk Fisheries Program. She has been working for the Karuk Wildlife Program and in prescribed fire since 2018. Jessica plays a key role in protecting sensitive cultural sites during local wildfire events as a cultural consultant representing the Karuk Tribe. Her ancestral connection to the land and the traditional knowledge passed on to her inspires the care and dedication she brings to her work, whether protecting and restoring wildlife, safeguarding cultural resources, or supporting traditional Karuk land management. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to Bruno, Jessica, and Chook-Chook. Welcome.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you to the American Philosophical Society and CNAIR and for you all for joining us today. I think just to get started, maybe I'll invite the three of us to just kind of introduce ourselves a little bit more, and the question that we can all kind of respond to, Jess and Chook-Chook, is sort of just to give a kind of primer on in addition to fully maybe saying, who we are, kind of what your personal relationship is with fire, professional relationship, how you work with fire, what fire kind of is to you. And then once we do that, we'll watch the first of two videos that we're going to show. I don't know if either one of you wants to start, or I can also start.
Lead us off, Bruno.
Okay, I'll start. Thank you, Jess, by the way, extra for joining us today. The poster for this event said that Vicki Preston would be joining. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to, and Jess is being very awesome and filling in. I'm a settler, an academic. I live on Pequot and Mohegan and Nipmuc territory right now in Hartford, Connecticut. It's my home. Been working with the Karuk Tribe as a filmmaker and a researcher since 2018. It's been just an incredible learning opportunity. I've learned so much about environmental justice, so much about how to conduct research in a good way, how to do a totally new approach to making films that's been very collaborative, very community oriented. So I feel very lucky to do the work that I've been doing. I'm currently writing a book about Indigenous fire management, and kind of the politics of environmental crisis right now. So you can keep an eye out for that. All the work that I do with the Karuk Tribe is through the practicing Pikyav process, which is kind of a tribal IRB process in a sense that kind of guides outside researchers to work with the tribe in a way that emphasizes Karuk philosophies of Pikyav. The other speakers can speak more about that term, but I understand it as, it means kind of to fix, to repair, to renew, to regenerate. So making sure that kind of every aspect of the research is focused on dialogue with cultural practitioners and community members, focused on reciprocity, focused on knowledge sovereignty and data sovereignty, and contributing to the ongoing work of fixing, repairing, and renewing Karuk territory and the world. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I really didn't have much of a relationship with fire before working with Karuk people. I'm originally from Nipmuc territory in Massachusetts, on the East Coast. And so for me, fire is still scary. Fire is very dangerous. But I've also, seen all the beautiful ways that fire transforms landscapes, and making, for me, the main mission of my work is to contribute to the ongoing Karuk process of revitalizing their relationship with fire and returning fire back to the people. That's a process that's been going on for a long time and is continuing into the future. So how about I kick it over to Chook-Chook?
Fine. Yeah, Ayuki, Chook-Chook Hillman. Uh, yeah, I would say like I do a lot of like advocacy work for cultural fire and traditional fire. I have to use fire almost every day just in like daily life. We have wood burning stoves and we're always working with wood. And so, yeah, I use fire in that way really often. I don't do much like prescribed firework, in terms of like bigger projects. That's a lane that I don't really go into much. But I would say I've got a really strong relationship with fire. I, use it often. Yeah, just in daily life, pretty constantly. But I've spent quite a few years doing, yeah, advocacy work on behalf of the land. And yeah, I also see like how beautiful fire can be, like even when it's destructive. We talk about there wanting to see like a mosaic of fire on the landscape, and so you kind of need um, different types of fire: low intensity, medium, high intensity fire. And the way that our forest is position now with the types of trees and plants, I don't really think it's always necessarily a bad thing to get some fresh slate. It's pretty rough to look at when we have some, high acreage, really high intensity fires. It looks really rough for a while. And so I think it's, important for us to just like keeping our eye on the future and having the resources and the time to actually go back in and treat these areas that have been kind of devastated by high intensity fire, because often the plant communities that come back are the plant communities that had been there before. I don't know, whatever we want to call it, colonization, empire, American empire, and the destruction of our plant communities and our peoples. So yeah. How about Jessica? Want to say something?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Conrad. I, yeah, there's a lot that goes into my relationship with fire. Whether it's things that we're taught about through ceremony, or just being raised in a family who has multiple generations of wildland firefighting and being growing up and living in an area with frequent wildland fires, and also an area where fire is always it's always been taught to me that fire has been a part of our landscape here, and that includes cultural and intentional fire, as well as lightning fires, and wildland fires. And then what that looks like in my work, I do quite a bit of, well, I try to do as much as I can of the prescribed fire, and trying to continually learn to be a good cultural fire practitioner. I think in that work you learn more every single time you're putting fire in a place, and it's different for every single place you're putting it in and every intention you have for that place. And yeah, it could look different so many different ways, and it all comes together for me in building my relationship to fire, and also working on wildland fires in fire suppression, as as a cultural consultant on wildland fires, on suppression efforts that happen here in Karuk ancestral lands. And that looks vastly different from what a cultural fire looks like, and that looks different from what a prescribed fire looks like. And so that looks different from what fires for ceremony looks like. And so just bringing that all together, trying to bring that all together and build this relationship that I've been building with fire my whole life. And yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. So I thought we would just start by watching a really short video. This is a piece that came out in 2019. It was part of the Karuk Tribe and the Karuk Department of Natural Resources sort of strategic push on the kind of social, cultural, and policy level to kind of advocate for more good fire, more prescribed fire in California as a way to kind of address the wildfire crisis. And so I did help out with this video. It's a little bit older, but it's a nice short piece, and we can kind of take a look at it and then talk about it afterwards. So I'm just going to share my screen. Are we seeing and hearing?
I'm not hearing.
Is what brought us to this place where we are at today, where we.
You say you're not getting sound.
I'm hearing him talk now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we
I wasn't
are.
hearing anything at first. It may have not been audio.
Okay, great. I'll just start it over. It's only 2 minutes.
Fear of fire is what brought us to this place where we are at today, where we really have reason to fear fire.
Prescribed fire can be a tool, perhaps the most powerful tool to combat the impacts of high severity fires.
We have to reestablish a positive relationship with fire. Our knowledge of this landscape and the use of fire to protect our communities, to enhance the resources that we need to survive, it's here.
People are beginning to see the benefits of prescribed fire more now than they have in a long time, over 100 years. When you see it, you realize, oh, it's going to be okay.
The more time goes on that we don't put fire back on these landscapes at the time and at the scale that we need to, then it's going to do it, not on our terms. Fire suppression has failed. Our first response has to be manage it, not suppress it, but manage it.
Yeah, maybe the sound, maybe I'm having sound issues. That's something to think about. But I guess anyway, so following from there, Chook-Chook can get Jess, I guess my question would be, that short video kind of talks about how cultural burning, prescribed burning, intentional uses of fire can be a good protection against out of control wildfire. But fire is positive and good, or can be good in a number of different ways. Maybe could the two of you kind of just talk about or break down a little bit, like what are some of the ways that fire is a positive thing for the land, for your community?
Yeah, I guess I can have an answer for that question. A lot of times when I think about the benefits of fire, I think about like what our basket weavers have told us, and mostly because here in Karuk ancestral lands, our basket weavers have been this like basically the catalyst to our fire revitalization of our relationship with fire. There are some of the first people to notice some of the negative impacts of fire suppression that had on the basket materials. A lot of basket materials that we use, that Karuk people use, are fire dependent species. Fire can completely change the way these materials look, the strength of them, how they grow, if whether or not they can be actually used in baskets and hold up. We have master basket weavers in our tribe, and there are ancient baskets all over in museums, and people have some that they were able to hold on to from their aunts, from their families, and basket weavers were just seeing this rapid decline in the quality of their materials after fire suppression, and were pushing constantly to have their gathering places burned, because they knew that that's what those materials needed, that's what those plants needed. So I think about the benefits to that, and that there are fire dependent species as well as fire adapted species. And then I also think about the benefit. I do wildlife work for my day job. So I research a lot about the benefits to wildlife habitat and the quality of wildlife habitat. And this is probably popping in my mind because we're coming off of this Meadows workshop here that we just had at the Karuk DNR, where I work. And Meadows is kind of this missing piece that we have here because of fire exclusion and encroachment of conifers from plantations on our meadow systems that we historically had across our landscape, but have very, very few of now, and none to scale that can provide the type of habitat that we would need for our elk, our deer, and just a lot of our wildlife, as well as a lot of our plant species that are specialists to meadow ecologies. That's where they grow. A lot of our plant species are our medicines, our fibers, and our foods. So that's like a huge missing piece to our culture, as well as the health of our landscape. And with bringing fire back to be able to restore some of those meadows, open up some of those meadows, push back some of that encroachment, I see those types of benefits as well in thinking about introducing fire to the land, or bringing back fire to the land, or not excluding fire from the land, or managing fire differently than how it is currently managed in suppression.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, that was awesome. I'd like to agree with what Jessica said, and I'd say this relationship to fire, I do think that that's really important and a net positive. Like, it's just, everybody's grown up to fear it. And you say, if a kid's playing in a campfire, which is probably like most people's experience with fire, it's like, you're going to pee the bed, don't play, don't, which, is true. But that means like there's no experimentation, there's no relationship besides it's going to hurt you and it's going to do damage. And so I think everybody in our community and the communities across the country that are already have established relationships with fire, or are trying to establish relationships with fire, I think it's really good for us to do those things. It's healing for people too. And when we talk about the meadows, our plant communities, our ungulate populations, and all those meadows that Jess is talking about that have been encroached or whatever, you'll find lots of artifacts because it's people habitat as well. And those, mid-slope meadows are really crucial to the ecosystem. And like we always are trying to take out one piece of the ecosystem or another. And I think fire being demonized by the Forest Service, and that people who use fire being demonized and imprisoned has had a really negative impact. And so you see there's a lot of happiness and joy when people get together, they put fire on the ground, do it in a good way. It's very community. Right now, the way we do it takes a lot of people. With like a big prescribed fire group, it takes a lot of people, but you do see a lot of really good community building and people learning and people getting more comfortable. We have kids burning, and we haven't had an uptick in so-called arson or anything like that. Like the people that are using fire as a tool know the power and know how to use it and aren't just out going to be burning everything down. So like skill and knowledge is being built. And yeah, I think that's a positive for the future, that like everyone's relationship with fire has been diminished over the past century, and rebuilding that relationship's good. Like everybody feels good about like, oh, I walked outside in the rain, like, or like we all get to experience nature in these ways, but we've like excluded fire as this other demon, scary, bad thing. And yeah, I see a real positive when we're using fire as a tool for our community.
Absolutely. So yeah, my next question is kind of about some of the concrete steps that your community is taking to kind of bring fire back. And yeah, so I mean, the landscapes of California are, fire-prone landscapes. A lot of the plants and animals are fire adapted or fire dependent species. And colonizers, European and then Euro-American colonizers have used violence, incarceration, criminalization, and any means necessary to separate the indigenous peoples of California from their relationship with fire. Going back to the 1770s, even in Southern California, the kind of Spanish colonial government issued an edict banning indigenous peoples from burning. In 1850, right after the California was founded as a state, in the first session of the California legislature, you have the 1850, believe it was called the Act for the Governance and Protection of Indians. And it was really a vile kind of racist piece of legislation that was designed to facilitate the violence against indigenous peoples, the sort of enslavement of indigenous peoples, and the criminalization of cultural practices. And indigenous burning was named as one thing specifically that was to be outlawed. And this is one of the first laws ever passed in California. Fast forward to 1911, you have the Federal Weeks Act, which kind of inaugurated the fire suppression paradigm at a federal kind of national level. And kind of birthed the kind of modern apparatus of wildland firefighting that we have today. And then that law was strengthened by additional laws in the 1920s and 1930s. And along with that kind of apparatus of fighting fire comes with now a federal mandate to incarcerate or otherwise, criminalize indigenous cultural fire practitioners, folks that had been using fire as a management tool, as part of ceremony, and as part of culture since time immemorial for thousands of years. So then you kind of jump forward to the 80s, the 90s, and into this century, and you have this resurgence of burning and burning knowledge, burning practice. And so I guess my question is for you guys, like, what what are some of those concrete steps that the community is taking to actually put fire back into the hands of people? And for other, I guess, in terms of other Indigenous nations throughout the country, the continent, to what extent have you interacted with other cultural fire practitioners from other places? Or what advice would you have for folks trying to revitalize their relationship with fire wherever they might be? So kind of a bunch of questions there, and feel free to just kind of, respond however.
So as far as like taking some steps, I think that there's no like one way to get to where folks want to be. And, there's, so many different Indigenous groups across the world, and they all have different reasons for doing things and different ways of going about those things. So I don't think that there's one way. For Karuk people, what that looks like for us is most of our land is occupied by the United States Forest Service. We don't have we don't have a reservation or any tribal lands that we can just go out and burn on when we feel like we need to go out, when we know that we need to go out and burn on them. So what that looked like for us really was, spending decades building a relationship with our local Forest Service folks. 20, 30, 40 years of building these relationships to get to a point where there's some trust there. And it was very long process that, I wasn't involved in because it's been happening all of my life. And before that, people were putting themselves in a place to speak about this. And I know there was multiple questions and a couple of things were answers were popping in my head. So I don't really know what order they came in or where to go. But I think that there was one question that brought to mind just like the resilience of the people that knew about our Karuk fire practices and, had the courage to continue some of as much as they possibly could on their own, continue those practices and pass that knowledge on to their families. And you get to a point where, 100 years of fire suppression down the way, there's still Karuk people that know how we burned and how we burned in specific places and when we did that. I think about that pretty often. That's where this all comes from, and that's how we still have this knowledge, this source of knowledge. And then I think I'm missing maybe the last question you asked in there, Bruno. I don't know if you maybe advice of was it advice or I think there is, Bruno mentioned that there's this resurgence in revitalizing Indigenous people's connection to fire, and it's happening all over the world. Here in Karuk Ancestral Territory, we've hosted Indigenous women's trexes. There are other tribal folks, and our neighbors, the Yurok tribe, has the Cultural Fire Management Council, and they do as much burning as they possibly can, and they're really pushing for it. And they host a Trex as well, prescribed fire training exchange for folks that are new to Trex, is what that is. And so we led one that was all Indigenous women, and we had people from Australia and South America and Canada, and from all different Indigenous groups from across the world. There are also some of the folks that came from Australia, some of the Aboriginal folks that came to our women's treks last year hosted their first Indigenous women's treks in Australia. So that was really cool to hear about, that they basically took that and, are giving that back to their people as well, in their places. I know that there are multiple other tribes across the United States that are gearing up to host some Indigenous-led prescribed fire trainings, which is really exciting to hear about. I think there are also some, programs and different things that are popping up across, at least I know of the US, that are, Indigenous-led fire revitalization groups that are working to bring this information to people across the US, across the US. So yeah, I can't think of a bunch offhand and name drop a bunch, but there are a lot of people that are doing this work and trying to make it accessible to other folks that they know have a hard time accessing that's been excluded from this type of work, that they know want to restart their relationship with fire. And so it's really inspiring to see that there's like a lot of these groups popping up to help other folks as well do this work.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, I'd say one thing our community did well, it's something that Jessica talked about earlier, and it's our elders, for generations have been working towards this in whatever way we can. And, we say often in California that there's everybody has a unique California Indian story. The genocide here was just so swift and brutal. It wasn't the same as what happened on the East Coast and in the Midwest. It was just, all the worst, lowest dregs of society came to California. And it was just whatever, the Wild West to do things. And so I would say that I don't know, I think that point is just something to bring up. Like, they weren't trying to make treaties, they weren't trying to do nothing. It was just some straight genocide, quick style. And so along with that, you lose knowledge, you lose these different things. But so our ancestors have been, trying these different ways, whether they're secretly burning, and like the Forest Service had said, they're like coyotes in the brush, constantly lighting little fires, of our people. And there was a district ranger who said, the only thing you can do to stop them is take a shot. And, we still have a hanging tree left from, hanging for burning, imprisonment. And so then, okay, once that type of, you have just like straight up genocide, then you have this, like a cultural genocide, incrimination, then you just have little secret burning, secret management, okay, stories being passed on. Then when we can be a little bit more visible, say in the 70s with, even like, the 60s, you have this civil rights movement. In the early 70s, you start having this, American Indian movement. People are being more loud about being Indian, when a people goes through a genocide, you live through it in different ways. And so, there's different, like, sometimes you're like hiding, sometimes you're assimilating, sometimes you're, just doing things in a very particular way. And so in the 80s, it started to be where the women would, basket weavers would go to where there had been wildfire, say. And so that was like this way that then into the 90s, there's an elder who's passed away now, Laverne Glaze, and I loved her dearly. And she started putting on this program called Following the Smoke. And she would invite Forest Service and agency people from across the country to come. And she was her method was gonna teach outside people and other people the importance, our ways. We would have good times, we would share space. And it was like a week-long camp, and federal agency people would apply to come, and we'd host them for a week, and we'd feed them and regale them with stories and do demonstration dances. We would share culture. And as a young man, I was pretty grumpy and, like an angry person, about the genocide and stuff, so I loved her, but I didn't love that. Like, we shouldn't, I had this attitude about, like, we shouldn't be sharing any of our knowledge or our culture with non-Indian people. like constantly having to beg them, like, this isn't sovereignty, this isn't, I had a lot of hard feelings about it, but I wouldn't deny her. And so I would always go and cut wood, and I would do the demonstration brush dance that I, didn't enjoy doing, but it had a significant impact, and it did help push us into this next little phase where she had kind of chipped and chipped and chipped away and was kind of breaking the dam and creating relationships. But every time she would have like a local ranger that we would get kind of trained up and to where they were going to start doing some landscape management that was going to benefit the landscape or the people here, the basket weavers or those materials, they would ship them off. And one guy, we had a good district ranger. We had him for about 5 years, and we just got him all trained up, and they sent his ass to Alaska, like bang. And so that happened to us like multiple times, and like building the trust, building a relationship, trying to get projects done that aren't just extractive projects. That lasted for a few decades. And then the next transitional technique that we started using is, propaganda. And part of this thing, like that, it's a line that I can't stand, but we had to use it because, like, in general, like, American people don't care about things unless it affects them personally. And so you have to make these pleas and these points to where you're like, come on, Americans and landowners, like, you should care about this. You're having to plea. And so you say, like, we're using fire to fight fire. Oh, this helps the wildfire. This helps the scary thing. This helps the thing that protects your property. This property values, capitalism. You know what I mean? Like, we have to use all those kind of words to try to bring, not only awareness, but action to an issue. And so, I would say that we've used propaganda really well. And like, to me, I don't like to, lots of non-Indian people want there to be some easy thing to either combat climate change or combat this, combat that. We want an easy thing that just like makes total sense. And I think it's kind of lazy and sloppy to just be like, look, fight fire with fire. But we're using fire not out of fear. It's for the health and wellness of a community, of plant community, animal community, people community. But you have to use those talking points to break the dam. And so you've seen in that 2019 video, we're quite a bit past that now. And, I've said before, like, I think it's just a ridiculous idea that just the words fighting fire, I think it's dumb. And just like I said, yeah, well, you're going to fight rain, or you're going to fight an earthquake. You're going to fight anything, I just think fighting is just like such a colonizer way to do a thing, where like we don't have, like, in our oral history, we have a deep and rich oral history. Storytelling is a big thing in our culture. And the thing that's really telling about our stories that is what's not in there. And what's not in there is catastrophic wildfire. We don't have those we just don't have those stories. We have lots of different stories that include fire, but we just don't have ones, not only in like the spirit people time, the ancient times, or even just like oral history of just human times of like, then all the people had to run, you know what I mean? We just don't have those. And so I think that, I don't know, I think that we've used what we could for the time that we were in to move ourselves forward. And so, now we're at this moment that, we've now used the propaganda. Okay, now people are seeing, now people are doing it. We've kind of, I'd say we've taken all these little chinks out of the armor. Okay, and now we're at this point where we are starting to get to where cultural practitioners can burn without imprisonment. There is a little piece of insurance in California that, we helped advocate for, to where I think on any given day, there can be up to 50 people in the state of California in different places with a little permit that has, insurance for up to $1 million, where we can, a person can burn that day. So all these little things are growing towards this moment when, we're able to treat the landscape. But, there's an important point I need to make, is because it's taken 100 years for our landscape to be in the condition it's in now, which it's not easy for just Jess and I to go out and burn a big swath of land. Our forest has had a complete transition to a conifer dominant hardwood forest. It's more dangerous, where our ancestors, a couple kids and one elder could burn a significant amount of acres because of the way that our landscape was set up. We had much more of a like oak savanna grassland down in the valley, and we're in a very special ecological place where you have different types of burning in different places for different reasons at different times. But I've just never heard anybody say it's because we're scared. It's not because of fear. It's because it's just what you do, whether it's for acorns or just to keep it clean around your place. We didn't have weed whackers. You're going to do burning of tall, dry grasses to, not have as much ticks, or, you know what I mean? Like there's just all these reasons you do it, because it just makes sense. But I think that our people are in a place, and sorry, I'm getting a little bit lost, but the point I was going to make is that now, when I've done these webinars with different universities and different organizations, and we've talked to people now, like say progressive, liberal, environmental, non-Indians, now they'll say, it's pretty common, and they're well-meaning and well-intentioned, but there's a line that kind of drives me crazy. They'll say, let the Indians do it now. And I take offense at that, because all the wealth that has been extracted from this place is still in the hands of those families. The timber was taken, they've made these plantations, the gold was taken, the destruction has been done. The United States is still making money off of the place and through their conquest. And so, to me, let the Indians do it is disingenuous in my opinion. I think it's more like folks need to step up with those wallets, with the financial and physical resources it's going to take to kind of do some, not reversing, but setting the landscape on a trajectory to accept fire and to work to go a little bit backwards in time. So I don't know. That's just a point that I like to make. I appreciate it that people think Indian people should be doing it, which I agree, but the amount of acres there is and the amount of work there is to do, we actually need more than that. Actually, we need folks to be working in whatever place they live in, working on those landscapes with Indigenous people, and putting those resources to work that have been extracted from this place. Anyway, sorry, that was long-winded.
Thank you, Chook-Chook. So yeah, just to kind of wrap up before taking some questions, I think we'll skip the second video for time purposes. Going to continue to share just some other resources. Folks are can take a screenshot of this if you want. Karuk Tribe has produced a lot of great media. There's a Vimeo page, a YouTube page. You can follow WKRP or Karuk Women's Treks on Facebook. There's also a lot of great reports on knowledge sovereignty, climate adaptation, et cetera, at Karuk Tribe Climate Change Projects. There, Vicki Preston's Intentional Fire podcast is just interviews, with Karuk cultural fire practitioners talking about what they do. This Indigenous Fire Futures article came out a couple of years ago. It's a good one. And then you can see some other, Chook-Chook was featured in an AJ Plus video. So some links there for folks, and maybe we can send those out as in an email as well, just if folks want to continue their learning. Yeah, before we open it up for questions, I guess, yeah, Jess, Chook-Chook, any final kind of comments?
Yeah, I guess just in looking over some of the questions that we had, just to say quickly, some of the, I was thinking of, addressing some of the barriers that Indigenous people find when wanting to do cultural burning. And one of the things that I often think about are the types of qualifications required for that type of work, and how that excludes some of our most important tribal folks from doing that work, who not only have a responsibility to be there, have a right to be there, but are absolutely needed in that space. This includes our young folks and our elders who can't necessarily go through some of those qualifications. It excludes people that don't have access to internet, online resources in rural areas, connectivity, which is a lot of tribal lands. It excludes, so many people that are key in this work. I think about our elders often that can't do a pack test, but so they can't have that qualification, but absolutely need to be on these burns to be guiding folks that can do that work, as it has always been done. And then our young people that need to be there as well to be, building that comfortability and building that respect and building that understanding from, very young ages. And then to tie that in with another question, which was, what are some big successes around fire in our area? And I think about going out, I got to be a firing boss trainee on a prescribed fire that we did on one of my dad's ancestral villages. With a group of pre-K to first graders out there lighting fire in the traditional way with pitch sticks. And I got to participate as a firing boss trainee on that burn. And it was mostly just adorable, but also very inspiring. And as Chook had mentioned, this healing aspect of seeing fire be put on the landscape. We're not only healing the lands, but we're healing ourselves too. And I think about being someone who heard about fire my whole life and developed these relationships with fire my whole life. But when I was in elementary school, that was not something that was ever on the table. And then getting to see my little baby cousins and my niece and nephews out there, so excited to be doing this work. And then one of my little cousins, she's 4. Her family owns part of this property that is one of our ancestral villages. And she was driving down to her cabin on the river, and she drove past the burn unit, and she was just looks good where I burned, a few weeks later after the burn. And just that healing aspect of getting to see that. And I think it's in that age group, and also in our elders, that's when that healing is the most profound as well, because Chook mentioned, our elders had to go through a lot to be able to continue these traditions and be able to pass these knowledges on, and to be able to see their great grandchildren at 5 years old out here burning when they could have been killed for that is I could only imagine how that feels for them. And yeah, just circling back to Chook's comments on that healing aspect for our people. And I think that that's how it looks a lot of places. And yeah, healing that relationship to fire and taking as much time as we can with it to learn that respect again, and to build that relationship again, is like, whenever you're doing it, is a super big success, whether it's a tiny little piece, or a big planned large scale prescribed burn, or just a tiny little blackberry patch in your house, or whatever, in your yard, or whatever it is at your village. One willow patch that you've been growing down on the river bar below your house or something. Yeah, there's just a really large healing piece with that. And I guess I just wanted to end it on a positive note with some big successes. I would also say, like, my job that I do on wildfires, like, I think about that all the time, and that, like, that was never like a title or a position, and people before me had to like fight with everything they had, like Chook's dad and my grandparents, to create that space. And now it's a position that's written into law with different types of agreements that we have with our local Forest Service. So yeah, anytime I'm out on a assignment, I think about like, just think about that. Yeah, take some time to think about how even just having that position is like part of the success story, and it's like still building, constantly building. It definitely has a long way to go, but you kind of gotta, a win is a win, they say. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening. I know we're just about at time. I don't know, Ruth, if you think we have time for maybe one question, but just again, really appreciate you all. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bruno and Jessica and Chook-Chook, for sharing this with us. Give everyone a chance to give a round of applause. I'm happy to hang out if you guys want to stay and answer some questions for people who don't have to rush right off. So yeah, I'll stay here until you get tired of answering questions.
I would like to add just two things before everybody jams, if we do have the time. I saw one question in the chat that was about how do we kind of limit exposure to, say, women or pregnant women due to like smoke. And yeah, when we are doing prescribed fires, we do have clean air facility. A lot of people in our community have air purifiers. We're becoming a fire adapted community as well. So like we do look out for that. And I think the other thing in regards to the smoke part is like, when we are doing the controlled burns, the smoke impacts are so much less. It is like not even close to the amount that you get during a wildfire. During a wildfire, sometimes like you don't see the sun for weeks. Like it's really, really strong. So I think that the more we can do during these times where we can kind of control the severity, the amount of acres, all those things, like the smoke impacts are much less when those are in our hands. And the other thing I wanted to make sure and note is that another thing that we did, like that's very important if you're going to take this work back to your community, is building the social license to do this work. And we went really slow and really intentionally, and it was rough for quite a few years. Our first two like trexes that we did were very slow. We've got a ton of community engagement and talking with everyone, and kind of painfully slow, small amounts of acres to build that trust. And so, yeah, the social license is really big. And I think that we've probably helped build that for other people, like not to have our community take a lot of credit or anything, but like we did it very intentionally and didn't have any foul ups, you know what I mean? We didn't have any, big foul ups. Oh, the fire got away, then it burned down a house, and then, all those kind of things. We were very slow and intentional, and got the community's trust and buy-in. Then now we've been able to move up the river about 50 miles to a very conservative area and use fire on the landscape. So I think that if you're going back to your community, building the social license is huge. And now there is research, there is a bunch that has gone well, that I think other people can point to if they're wanting to do this work. But yeah, building social license is really key.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that too. I did mention like building relationships with like agencies that have the final say over lands, but yeah, also within your community. And one thing that'll definitely always hold you to build to the social license is listening to your elders, because yeah, they'll tell you if you're doing something wrong. And having elders, yeah, present when doing these burn plans, having elders present when you're putting the fire on the ground, having elders present if you're like lucky enough to be in a community that you have elders around you that are willing to share some of their knowledge. Yeah, they'll definitely hold you accountable to your people and to doing things in the right way.
I think we have a question for, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, Afyang Nyang.
Oh wow, you said that beautifully. I'm really shocked. I go by Affy to make it easier. I don't have a question. I just have a comment to make. This was a great presentation. One thing that I'm really taking away from this is the idea that fire is something to be managed and not suppressed. And I recently saw a movie 3 weeks ago called Die My Love with Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson. I'm about to spoil it, so if you guys want to watch it, you should mute me. But basically, it's the story of like the quintessential wild woman who marries a man who has a family full of trauma, and she is suppressed. Her wildness is suppressed. The way she expresses herself is expressed. As a fiery woman, she's exposing the truth out, and people are not appreciating it to the point where she has a baby. She suffers from PPD, and she literally goes crazy. And at the end of the movie, it's a shot of her walking away from her husband, and she sets fire to a forest in California. And it's like the director is saying she's the cause of the forest fire. And it's sort of like her divine feminine rage, whatever you want to say it, it's something that has been oppressed by the patriarchy forever. So it's like that natural feminine power that we have, right? It makes me think of the fire and how it's always trying to be suppressed. And when you suppress it, you end up with forest fires. You end up with people going insane. You end up with cultural malaise, right? So I just found that really interesting. I've never even heard of like the difference between the suppression and management. So I just wanted to share that. Sorry, I spoiled the movie. It's still a good movie. You guys should go see it. So thank you so much for this, y'all. This was amazing.
Are there any other questions? Mary Ladd just raised her hand.
Thanks so much. I just had one comment and then one question. So when we did a burn plan for a cultural burn, it was in conjunction with CAL FIRE. So we weren't really allowed to have, input from our elders. So that's one, like just observation. And then the second is, as it relates to training, I feel like training and certification is, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we have two folks, possibly three, who need to be trained. It's about 5 hours away to go do the training. So do you all just train together in your region? Or that's one area that I'm definitely trying to figure out, because I'll learn about a training, but it's so far away, and or it requires 1 week or 10 days. And so just how to get this, and is this certification for non-tribal purposes? That's what it seems like. Okay, I'll pass. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I definitely don't have a solution or an answer to the way trainings are set up by CAL FIRE, by the Forest Service, by NWCG, whoever is like requesting the qualifications that are needed to conduct prescribed fires. I think Yeah, it's definitely something that holds so many people back. In the work that I do on wildfire suppression, it runs us so thin because people just don't have the type of access that they need to get qualified. And then we end up with like two people being able to go out and, carry these roles for an entire season, which could be months. And it runs our resources really thin. And yeah, I think most people in this work trying to revitalize traditional fire practices are experiencing this this setback or this wall that they just hit with these qualifications that are required, and the lack of access that we have to them. It's absolutely frustrating, and I see it time and time again in the work that I do. And yeah, I don't know if anyone's had an answer yet. I do know, California Cultural Fire, or the Cultural Fire Management Council, which is our neighbors, the Karuk Tribe. They just got a facility that they're hoping it's going to be a training facility. But then again, that doesn't help the issue with other folks having access to those. Like that's still travel for other people that want to get that training from them. And then for the Karuk Tribe, like we're also working on a prescribed fire training facility here as well. And that's to try and give ourselves more of that ability to, host those trainings for folks here that want them, that typically haven't been in, historically or in previous years haven't been able to access those, and trying to bring that home. And I know a couple of other tribes and prescribed fire or cultural fire groups, NGOs and stuff, are also working to build and bring their own like brick and mortar training facilities to their areas because of this issue. But that's not like feasible at all for most people. And yeah, it takes so many resources, right, to do something like that. Yeah, it's hard. It's something that like is the biggest barrier for sure. And I don't really have an answer for that. I'm sorry.
Any other questions? Thomas, let me know if I've missed anything. Don't see anything. Somebody has to leave. So I want to thank everybody again.
Actually, I had one quick question. If it's
okay, go ahead.
Just real quick, we're talking a lot about California. How much of this maybe is applied on the East Coast?
I don't know. I was hoping that maybe Bruno would know. I mean, I don't know how much is applied on the East Coast, and I did see the other year that there was a pretty big fire, I think in Maine, like a wildfire, and so I don't know exactly how Indigenous people on the East Coast, what their burn intervals were, or what different plant. I don't know about what they traditionally did, or necessarily about what they're up to now, and the places where that's appropriate, their landscape. And we said having fires around Philly. Yeah. And again, like I think as far as like the Karuk people go, we kind of, at least me and Jessica today, and I think other people, we try to just say like, one size doesn't fit all. And I don't have, we don't claim to know what Indigenous people should do in their place. And so, as far as, I know on the Midwest, there's a lot of people using fire, and like farmers have always been allowed to, like white people. And that's been a problem that we've brought up before, where it's like all agencies, private entities, environmental NGOs, farmers, every single person besides Indian people were allowed to burn in one way or another, is why we've kind of been pretty clear about like, this is just like an extension of genocide when other people are able to exercise like a human right to fire. So yeah, and so yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing on the East Coast, but yeah, I did meet up with some folks the other day from the Midwest that are using fire to, for their grasslands, because it's like the Midwest was like all wildflowers and like really awesome, holding capacity for, large ungulates, medium-sized ungulates for so many animals. And, so much has just been turned into, poisoned corn and soy and canola, Monsanto, Midwest or whatever. And some Indian people are bringing buffalo back and are trying to use burning to get back some of those plant populations, because often fire dependent species, they can live dormant, seeds can live dormant for a really long time, over 100 years in some cases, and then once you have a disturbance, whether it's fire or other, can then kind of sprout. So hopefully with the reintroduction of buffalo and with fire, maybe some of the Midwest can benefit from this as well.
Yeah, I would just add that it looks like someone named Ginger left a link for the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network. And I was recently at one of their annual meetings and was able to connect with some folks from the East Coast that I know are doing work in prescribed fire. So yeah, that could be a good place to look. See it in the comments there. I do know that there are folks connected with that on the East Coast, in the DC area and in other areas that are working in this realm with cultural fire and stuff.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, really, just another really quick response to that. Just sort of like moving down the coast. The east coast of Canada, of course, does in recent years has been having a lot of high intensity wildfires. Causing New York City even to be kind of clouded in wildfire smoke, which is a new experience for I think most New Yorkers. And there is some great burning happening in the eastern kind of provinces of Canada. The person I look to for that often is Amy Cardinal Christensen, who's a scholar and kind of all around advocate for Indigenous burning. She has a podcast called the Good Fire Podcast, which she interviews Indigenous fire practitioners from all over the world, East Coast, West Coast, every continent. It's a great one to check out, and her written work is fantastic as well. I think Indigenous peoples have used and interacted with fire all across the continent. Like the landscapes everywhere have been shaped by the use of intentional fire to different degrees. Even if the landscapes of, say, like Haudenosaunee territory in present-day upstate New York aren't necessarily fire adapted in the same way that like the landscapes of Karuk country are, there's still a tradition of burning there. In the southeast of the US, it's kind of a different situation. In the sense that prescribed burning has really been kind of decriminalized and has been sort of part of landscape management for a lot longer than on the West Coast. The Tall Timbers Research Institute was kind of one of the first kind of mainstream-ish non-Indigenous organizations to really relook at the whole fire suppression paradigm back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And so, yeah, a lot of folks in California are looking to what's happening in like Florida, for example, as like, oh, they're doing a lot of burning. Like Florida is a fire prone landscape and there's a lot of burning there. Although it's a lot of agencies and it's not necessarily being done in a way that has anything to do with Indigenous sovereignty or resurgence, although I think that is happening as well. We just presented with some Lumbee folks from North Carolina who are doing some burning through a prescribed burn association model. So yeah, the kind of policy and cultural landscape is different in the Southeast than it is in California. And yeah, one of the main differences is there's that tolerance of this deeper history of non-Indigenous folks being able to use fire and it not being kind of criminalized and penalized in the same way as you see it as being a tool of colonization elsewhere. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Yeah, for that description. Do you have a link for the person you were mentioning? I was trying to Google her when you were talking. I kept coming up with other people and other podcasts.
Okay, yeah, her name is Amy Cardinal Christensen, and the podcast is just called Good Fire.
Okay. Great, thank you. And we can send out an email after the fact to people who are registered for this with some of these links. There's a lot of good information in here. And we'll also have the recording on our YouTube channel, so you can come back and look at that. Refresh your memories. Are there any other questions? Seems like people are having to head out. Thank you again. Congratulations. Really appreciate you taking the time, all three of you, to share this with us. And for everyone who joined in the audience, it's really wonderful to have all of you here. Please come back for our next talk and think about coming to visit us. Yeah, we'd like to continue hearing from you and seeing you in various spaces. And yeah, Bruno, Jessica, and Chook-Chook, thank you so much. Have hope. Yeah, this was really great.
Yeah, thanks
Wonderful.
everyone.
Thanks. See you at the next one.
Take care.